There's something incredible about seeing something be born, grow, and then end. Being able to see the whole of a story, to see the path traveled, to watch something that holds your hand as it shows you something that hurts, while telling you everything is going to be okay. It can sometimes take 1,000 pages in a novel, or 8 seasons of a television show, or a trilogy of movies, to connect you to a story, show you its genesis, progress, and climax, and send you home being fulfilled. It's not an easy task to build a world and a relationship with characters that will grab hold of you intensely and refuse to let go long after it's over. It's a lot to ask from any medium, and it's statistically unlikely to happen. Most of the time it'll be trite or forgettable or average. Not every story told is going to be a revelation, and those that burrow into your soul and take up residence are special and should be treasured. Building something that transcends, something that makes you fall in love, feel pain, grip your heart, and force you to look at yourself and your life can take a very long time and require dedication from both the creator and the consumer. But sometimes, a truly perfect soul-grabbing work of art is created that does all of that in 36 minutes. And it'll do it by surprise, because it's hidden in the most unlikely of places. So let's talk about that. But first, disclaimer time! This is not a review show! I am nerd incorrect. I'm passionate, opinionated, highly subjective, and so many times incorrect. I have to repeat, this is not a review show. I'm not going to objectively weigh any piece of art on any merits. What I will do is explore the things that make entertainment beautiful and explore the art created for us to consume while we live our lives. Thank you for joining me while I explore the adventures we have from inside the house.
I'm uncool, I'm the Urkel to everyone's Bill Murray. I've been broke in every sense of the word. And I keep chasing my next high score. Issues galore, I'm a walking, talking magazine we all know that nobody reads. What's the use in words when they don't even understand me?
Welcome to The Adventures We Have from Inside the House, a podcast about entertainment, how and why we consume it, and how it shapes our lives. And more importantly, a podcast that celebrates the things you like, even if nobody else does. My name is Tim Riel, and I am Nerd Incorrect, the boy who loves entertainment of every kind and always seems to fall in love with the properties and art that don't always follow the crowd. There's a really good reason why you may not know about the television show Mythic Quest, despite how good it is. It was created by many of the people behind It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and stars Rob McIlhenny, and has some of the sharpest writing in television today. It feels like if Silicon Valley was written by the Always Sunny team, and that makes it better than both those shows. All of these are reasons you should know about it, but you don't. Because it's on Apple TV+. Look, Apple TV+ is basically the HBO of streaming platforms. It's expensive, it caters to a more elitist clientele, and has almost no content. It focuses on quality over quantity, which isn't conducive to having people drop cash monthly. If you want to be successful, Apple TV+, you're going to need to release more than just 8 shows a year. Legitimately, you can watch everything good that it has to offer in 1 month. The productions it offers are incredible, and you should watch them. But just take a month off from the other entertainment you already watch and just watch Apple TV Plus for that month, and then go back to Netflix. I'm not kidding about the quality, though. The Morning Show, Ted Lasso, Trying, Central Park, Mythic Quest, this is all top-tier television. So yeah, it's worth spending a couple of bucks. Mythic Quest's first season is good. It's definitely trying to find its footing and identity, and you can see it try to figure out if it's a workplace comedy or a dark comedy or a standard sitcom or something else. The entire first season seems a little lost, But it's worth watching because greatness is under the surface. Season 2 is incredible. They really figured themselves out. The whole first season follows a video game studio who's creating an expansion for their extremely successful video game. It focuses on the game's creator and his relationship with the lead programmer and the rest of the supporting cast. It's a solid storyline. But episode 5, that's something else. It's not about the team we've followed so far. It's not about the game. It's a completely separate standalone story. It's different in tone. It's different in every way. If it wasn't for the fact that you're selecting the episode on the show's page on Apple TV Plus, it would be easy to believe that you were watching a completely different show. And for me, it's the best episode of television I have watched in the last 20 years. This isn't a review show. I mean, you already know that. So this isn't going to be a review of this episode of television. If you want a review, you pretty much just heard it. This is the best episode of TV I've seen in 20 years. That being said, you and I are different people. And this isn't a review because I'm not objective enough to write a review. I speak in hyperbole and with a tone and language that pretends to state facts. I know what I'm saying isn't facts. Please understand that I know this. But it's super fun to have hard opinions. And these are my opinions. Which is why I don't do reviews. You can debate a review, but you can't debate my opinions because they're mine. I'm right about how I feel, so eat it. I will, however, spoil a lot of this episode. So, and I mean this with all of my heart. If you haven't seen episode 5 of season 1 of Mythic Quest, which is called A Dark Quiet Death, stop listening right now. If you end up not watching episode 5 of season 1 of Mythic Quest called Dark Quiet Death, don't come back to this episode of the podcast. Wait for the next one. I want you to go into Dark Quiet Death fresh and experience a truly great piece of art. I want to share that with you. Please, if you do nothing else, share this piece of media with me. I want the rest of today's podcast to be about sharing that work of art with each other. Let's get the big obvious thing out of the way first. Jake Johnson and Kristen Milioti are so fucking good all the damn time in everything they do that, of course, this episode was going to be great. There's something so absolutely incredible about each of these actors that makes them incomparably watchable. Jake Johnson is easily the biggest reason New Girl lasted as long as it did. No offense to Zooey Deschanel and Max Greenfield, who are fine actors, but Jake Johnson's Nick Miller is who we all wanted to be. In every role Jake accepts, he's flawless. He's just good. Please, cast Jake Johnson in everything, right now, all the time, the end. Thank you. And Kristen, if you have any doubt how amazingly watchable and instantaneously lovable she is, remember that she's the mother from How I Met Your Mother. She was introduced in the final episode of the 8th season. Think about that for a second. This show ran for 8 years and aired 184 episodes, and all the entire premise of the show was to hype up how amazing the mother is. Nobody could have lived up to that. Not one actress alive today could possibly pull off a performance that would make that whole run worth it. Except she did. Kristen Milioti was so pitch perfect that when the writers decided to kill her in the finale, the whole world lost their shit. This woman had only been in one season. She had to live up to 184 episodes of hype, and she crushed it. She was so perfect that the alternate unused ending, that you can find on YouTube, by the way, in which Ted and Tracy live happily ever after, is the fans' preferred ending. People loved Robin for 8 damn years, and only one season with Kristen Milioti was enough for everyone to be like, nah, I don't want to see Robin no more. Get rid of that lady. We want the new lady. If you need more proof about Kristen Milioti and how incredible she is, then check out the movie Palm Springs, the show made for love, and her episode of Black Mirror called USS Callister, which should have won her a goddamn Emmy. Dark Quiet's Death, two main characters, Doc and Bean, are played by Jake Johnson and Kristen Milioti. And so, obviously, it would take a lot for this to not be great television. I hate exposition. Hate it. It's absolutely necessary. Everything sucks when it's not there, but I hate it. Obviously, we need to be told who people are and what's going on. But for so many things, the exposition is mishandled and it's clunky. I think one of the major problems with a lot of exposition is that the exposition is the only thing it's doing. The writers need to write a scene that has two characters speaking where one can turn to the other and say something like, if we weren't brothers and our mother hadn't just married an asshole who will tank this company we were supposed to inherit, I would leave right now. That's a lot of information that the writers need you to know, and they need you to know it quickly, which is why the scene exists, but come on. Sure, it tells me everything I need to know, but it doesn't do anything else. Not to mention, who talks like that to their brother? He knows that information. He was there too. Dark Quiet Death has exposition, but it makes sure to also use it for something else. The exposition is used for character and relationship building. Look, they also have a lot to tell you very quickly, but they aren't wasting an entire scene to only tell you that. In the opening scene, we find out that Doc has been a video game producer for 6 years. Bean is a dark, brooding video game snob that plays a lot of games. They will produce a game together, and they will fall in love. Every single bit of that exposition is revealed not offhandedly to the audience, but instead, it's interwoven into Doc's realistic, awkward, intensely charming attempt to flirt with Bean. The writers also allow for moments from Kristen Milioti to have Bean pick up on the awkward moments that would give her character an out and allow her to show the intention of ignoring those awkward moments and continue the conversation because Bean is also into Doc. The writing and the acting weave the exposition, the intent, and the purpose together. They allow us to discover the relevant information and, more importantly, believe in the connection that is being formed. Again, Jack and Kristen play their parts so well that at no point is anything creepy, forced, or cringeworthy, which is not something I can say about a lot of other meet-cute moments in media. These two are going to get together. They're going to make a game. Doc already has the experience, and they're both cute and charming, so nothing in this scene is fake. It all makes sense, and the information was hidden in the creation of the bond. There's also some info that foreshadows an upcoming issue that I'll get into later. I just want you to know that it's coming, and it's about the game Doc produced, so that when I talk about it later, you're not like, no, why didn't you mention it before? I'm mentioning it now that I'm going to mention it later. So I'm foreshadowing the foreshadowing. The next scene, we need to know that the game is nearly done, that they're seeking funding, that they have seen many other investors. They've been turned down because their game is too unique, and we need to know why it's unique, and we need to know that the investor in the room doesn't do dark games and focuses more on family-friendly, popular video games, and we need to know that Doc and Bean are getting married. That's a lot. And other than an awkward delivery of, that's why my fiance and I made this game, the rest is served up to us in a conversation meant more to display the passion and exhaustion of our main characters. It's also a showcase for Bean's strength of vision and Doc's need to please those he sees as superior. I mean, he winces when Bean is dismissive. He qualifies her comments to dull their edge. Bean grows ever more defensive and exasperated, while Doc becomes more desperate and compliant. And then they get the funding. Each scene lets you know exactly what you need to know, but in a way that tells you what they want you to know. That these are real, fragile, complicated people, and they love each other. When they fall in love and start their video game production journey, they have a shared vision and a strong personal bond. They're in this together. They love each other. I mean, just watch the scene in the corporate lobby right after they get the funding. Doc gets up on the stage and holds his hands out to dance. Bean says no, and Doc says, "You can't win this one either." Because he knows how happy she is, and how happy he is. And right now, they know each other better than anybody can know a person. It's also a really heartbreaking piece of foreshadowing. I'm still not going to be talking about that yet, but just know, this is foreshadowing the foreshadowing. A really tricky part of any relationship is that there is a shared goal, but it's shared by individuals who, despite their best intentions, can't know for sure where the other stands and simply has to trust that they're both on the same page. The scary part is that in a relationship, we can be so sure about what we think the goal is that we miss that the other person isn't aiming for the same thing. We think that since we're on the same team and this is what I want, this must also be what my partner wants. It's the selfish part of humanity. My partner wants me to be happy, and this is what would make me happy. Therefore, this is what my partner wants. And on the other side of that is another human being thinking the exact same thing. And if either of you is wrong, you're both wrong. And now it's just a matter of who sees it first. It's clear that Doc wants to make Dark Quiet Death 2 a blockbuster smash hit because if he makes Bean's game hugely successful, she'll be happy. Because of course she will, since his happiness is also rooted in the success of the game, and they're on the same team. Every concession Bean makes to her original vision is defended by Doc by saying, "Of course it sucks that we have to do that, but you want the game to be successful, and so that's what needs to be done." Except, of course, Bean doesn't care if it's successful. She just wants to make a game that means something, and she wants to make that game with Doc. But she does want Doc to be happy. And since he also wants to make a game that means something with Bean, it's okay, because they're on the same page. Doc is afraid the game will fail because he's being told by the brand manager, the studio, and everyone else he respects that these changes need to be made to succeed. And since he has an inherent need to be pleasant, he tends to agree because they must be right. Despite his own doubts and Bean's absolute aversion to every requested change, he concedes because he wants Bean to be happy, and the game's success is what she wants because that's also what he wants, and they're on the same team. It's soul-crushing to watch this spiral out of control because at no point, now or at the end of the episode or at any other point, are they not utterly and totally in love with each other. They never fall out of love. They are always a huge part of each other's heart. They both believe they share the same goal, but if one of them is wrong, then both of them are wrong, and it's just a matter of who sees it first. In this episode of television, Bean sees it first. There's a scene that's played and staged so beautifully that I cried hard. They've just had a fight, they've apologized to each other, but Bean has definitely sacrificed more in the apology, and Doc just thinks that they're still on the same page. Bean has realized first that Doc doesn't actually know what Bean wants, and he probably never will. The camera is behind them as they sit on the desk, and it's framing the game posters. They're gripping each other's hands tightly, lovingly, and Bean is looking at Doc. She's clearly madly in love and very sad. He's all she really wants, to make important games with him and to be partners and to be in love. Doc is looking at the posters because all he wants is for Bean and Doc to have made the biggest game in history and be partners and be in love. They're not going to the same place, and Bean sees it first. The game becomes a huge success, major movie deal, Disney's involved, there's an animated character now to appeal to kids, Bean is out of the picture, and Doc is sat in his office with the successful game he wanted, except he wanted it for him and Bean. He wanted his and Bean's game to be the biggest. And because of the brand manager, the studio, and everyone else making demands, forcing concessions, Bean is gone. Doc is unhappy because the people running the show made him trash their original vision. They wouldn't let him just make the game Bean wanted. This is what Doc is feeling at my favorite moment in the whole episode. He's angry. He lost the love of his life and lost the game he wanted to make because of these corporate jerks. And he tears into the brand manager. Then the brand manager tells him, sure, I suggested those things. And I'll sit here and I'll take your abuse and your shouting and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Just like I always have. Because you're the boss. There's a beautiful piece of acting work for the next 27 seconds from Jake Johnson, who wordlessly lets us see the following revelations. He made the changes. He forced the concessions on Bean. At no point did he have to do anything to the game. He never had to argue with Bean. He never had to compromise. They'd made a hit game, and because of that, they were asked to make more of it. They didn't have to change it in any way that compromised the vision. He's the one that took the train off the rails, and he's the reason Bean left. He's made an awful mistake, and there's nothing he can do about it. It's incredible work. All of that in 27 seconds with just a slow zoom on Jake Johnson's face. I mentioned earlier about foreshadowing. There's a lot of beautiful little nods, but these two stood out to me as perfectly placed bits of info that told us what would happen. In the opening scene, we find out that Doc designed a game, but that the studio decided on the name and the box art, and that he had no say. That may or may not be true, but what we know now is, even if he did have the power to decide those things, he would have likely caved to the studio. He would spend the rest of the episode allowing the studio to make calls like that about his new game, and believing he had no say. This has been a problem from the beginning. The other piece of foreshadowing that I love, and absolutely breaks my heart, is when they're dancing in the lobby. He reaches out to her and she says no, and he tells her, you can't win this one either. And in that moment, he means that he can't fight the joy and neither can she fight the joy. But for the rest of the episode, she won't win ever again. He'll tell her over and over again through his actions and his persistence that you can't win this one either. The final scene shows them in the place they met. It's obvious that they still love each other. It's obvious that they're both very hurt. And it's obvious that it's over and that it can't be undone. I see myself in both of these characters. I've been driven by a passion for success and a need to be liked. I've also been propelled by loving someone and wanting to accomplish things with them. I've thought that I had the same plans and goals as someone, and I've found out that I was wrong. Sometimes I see it first, and sometimes I don't. It's very easy for me to believe my partner's on the same page and then fall into a pattern of pushing forward. I have a history of not stopping to check in with them to see if we're going the same way. I find it easy to assume that my happiness equates to their happiness because we both want the same thing, right? I, like Doc, am exceptionally good at pointing to my mistakes and my actions that created that rift well after the relationship is done. My hindsight is super good, but I rarely see it happening in the moment. The end of A Dark Quiet Death is not a happy ending, and I prefer that, because realistically, that's the ending I'm most accustomed to in my life. Relationships are the weakest point of my life. I'm committed and passionate and absolutely in love, but my focus on everything else and my belief that if I'm happy in the relationship, that they must be also, has made me a not great partner. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think many people have trouble giving focus to their partner. I think a lot of people will see themselves in both of these characters, which is why I want you all to watch this episode of television. I realize I said it was an unhappy ending, but only because I see myself in Doc, and I assume that his happiest moments were when he and Bean were simply together. I think Bean needed to be present and succeeding with him for Doc to be happy. Bean is fine. Bean has had a happy ending. She has moved on, and she has found happiness. I'm sad for Doc, but Bean's doing good. In 36 minutes, we see the birth, growth, and death of a relationship. Despite the obvious love, despite the seeming perfection of the match, we see something beautiful grow and then die in an organic way because relationships are complex. Being in a relationship with someone is tricky because you'll believe that their goal is to help you achieve your goals. And they will believe that your goal is to help them achieve theirs. And you'll both believe that they are the same goal. But maybe they're not. Episode 5 of Season 1 of Mythic Quest, called A Dark Quiet Death, is, for me, a perfect story. Because I can feel every single thing in that story. The joy and adrenaline of connecting with a soul that complements mine. The thrill of building the bonds in a relationship with a person I love. The excitement of embarking on a journey and attempting to reach a goal. The confusion when things start to fall apart. The denial when the person I love starts to question if the bond is still there. And the regret when everything is done and it's too late to change anything. And I think all these feelings, all of these circumstances, I believe they're universal. It takes a lot for a piece of art to connect with people. To hold a mirror up to experience and to truly transcend the medium, to imprint itself on your life. It can take 1,000 pages, or 8 seasons, or a trilogy of movies. But sometimes, it only takes 36 minutes. Our theme music is provided by Double Experience. You can find the track Bill Murray everywhere you get music. And my ability to take time out of my week to make this podcast is supplied by my supporters at patreon.com/nerdincorrect. If you support us on Patreon, thank you. And because you do, you're listening to this episode a week before anybody else. And if you want to be part of that club, head on over to patreon.com/nerdincorrect, where you get early access to all our podcasts, an exclusive podcast, and so much more. You can also join our Nerd Incorrect Discord server, The Incorrection, where we can discuss in more depth everything I talked about today. If you want your question and or comment about today's podcast featured in next week's episode of discussing the adventures we have from inside the house, you can drop it into our podcast-specific Discord channel or comment on the Patreon post of this episode. All of the comments on the Patreon will be featured, and if possible, as many of the Discord comments as well. I'm Tim Riel. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week as we discuss more of the adventures we have from inside the house.
I'm uncool, I'm the uncle that everyone's built, and that's alright with me. 'Cause I'm a walking, talking magazine. We all know that nobody reads, but what's the use in words when nobody understands me? What's the point of trying to be someone that I can't be?